We have some amazing artists here. I'm going to start with director Angie Higgins and let you kind of just popcorn around and introduce all of you. So, Angie, let's hear from you.
Hi, I'm Angie. I directed the play. And do I pass it to the next person,
Yes,
perhaps?
please.
All right, I'll pass it off. I'll pass it off to Nora 1. How about we go down the line? Nora 1, 2, 3.
Yes, hello, I am Nora 1. My name is, and I also play Christine 3. My name is Gabriella Goldstein. And my pronouns are she, her.
My
Oh,
name is Melissa.
No, it's okay.
oh, it's you, that's you. Yeah.
I was like, we're going in order. My name is Melissa Jones. My pronouns are she, her. I play Nora 2, which is the 1968 timeline, and Christine 1, which is the 2018 timeline. And I'll pass it to Roneet.
Hello, I'm Roneet Aliza Rahamim, and my pronouns are she, her. And I play Nora 3 in 1918, as well as Christine 2 in 1968. I forgot which number. Okay, yes, Christine 2.
And Angie's
Yeah, go ahead, Christian.
You're gonna pass it off to someone else.
Yeah, I'll pass it on to you.
Yes, hi, I'm Christian Pizzirani, and I play Daniel of all three time periods, and maybe a little bit backstage of Tom, but you'll never know because I'm backstage.
And we also
Pass
have
off to
Kailyn
Kailyn.
Erb here, our costume designer. Thank you so much for being here, Kailyn. Other members of the cast have had rehearsals tonight or other things, so we don't have everybody here, but we have quite a few. And I just stepped on your hi, Kailyn. You were starting to say hi.
That's okay.
And
It was just a hi.
I'm just going to stop talking.
It's okay. It's okay.
And my pronouns are she, her. I didn't say those. Thank you to all of you who did. Let's start off with Angie. This is her first time directing at City Lights, but she is a wonderful director and actor, super pro. Anyone who knows her has just loved working with her. I've been directed by her as well. I was fortunate to do so. Angie is also the artistic director of Silicon Valley Shakespeare, and she's just incredibly talented. She did a beautiful job with this show. Angie, I'd love to hear about how you first got connected with the show. What first spoke to you about this beautiful script?
Yes, of course. Well, Lisa Millette, our amazing executive artistic director, actually called me to see if I would be interested in this. She'd seen my production of Sense and Sensibility. So I think she knew that I am a movement heavy director, meaning that my shows are usually highly choreographed and staged. I think Lisa and I just adore Lisa. She's amazing. It's been wonderful working with her. But she and I think share a similar aesthetic. And I know that Lisa really loved the script. So I like to think that she thought that perhaps we would have a similar vision for how this show should play out. And, so I said to her, well, I haven't read the script. I, of course, know Nora A Doll's House, the original. Most of uh, theater students have read it at some point. And it's common reading in literature class. Not sure if anybody's read it here, but it was groundbreaking at the time in the late 1800s. Becky wrote beautiful dramaturgy on it that you can find on the City Lights website. But I personally am very interested in reinventing classics. I love the classics. It's why I'm an artistic director of a Shakespeare company whose mission is specifically innovating the classics. And so I immediately was intrigued just by the synopsis. So I said, oh, Lisa, can you send me the script? I want to make sure it's something that, I can bring something to the table, right? That I'm the right director for you when we were discussing the possibility of having me come on this project. And I read the script and I immediately thought, oh, this is so me. It's poetry. It's strong female characters. I love the arc of the story. And it absolutely was revisiting this classic. I felt in an extremely meaningful way that I think just shows how relevant the story is today as it was then, but really adds nuance and layers that I think build upon the original. And I'm sure that, actors can speak to this more about, how there was so many rich moments in the text to dive into. And really, so many times when I think of characters, I give people this analogy. Somebody told me this once. Most people, not just in theater or characters, but in life, kind of stand outside of themselves, where it's like, say, this is who you present to everyone, and this is you, right? Like you only let people get so close. And I always tell my cast, look, if you really want to dive into a character, you can't be afraid to step into it. But what this script does through the poetry is it takes that gap away, in my opinion, right? It forces you to step inside of what they actually are feeling and who they are, their essence. And then you have this really interesting nuance and layered scene work where the Noras are covering, right? And, going through so much, but then they break into what we call the medleys. And that just, to me, the prospect of getting to dive into that as a director was extremely fascinating and also terrifying. So when I read the script, I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. This is going to be a nightmare to block. Because none of the movement, if you've seen the show already, none of the movement really is dictated in the script. And you are reading it going, wait, what time period are we in? And who's going where? And it's a lot. If it's okay, I mean, I could even volley that to actors, what your first take was, if it was similar to mine. Does anybody have a?
I have a thought. My first take, because I know you as a director, Angie, my first thought was, I am so glad Angie is directing this, because Angie is a movement-based choreographer director. And so I was like, yeah, she's going to keep in mind where we all are on stage, and how some of the staging in the script is literally like Thomas disappears or Nora appears. It's as vague as that, right? And I was like, I don't know how this is going to magically happen. There's no like trap door or fly system where Nora is just going to like up from the stage. And I knew that Angie would be able to keep track of that. So I don't know, as an actor, I was actually not scared of that blocking, because I had full faith in Angie's ability. So I was like, that's not my problem, that is Angie's. And I trust that she will have that in hand. I just need to memorize what she does.
I've heard that praise a lot from people who've seen the show, that Angie has made it so clear. You never wonder what time period you're in, or who's Nora and who's Christine, and just the beauty and the motion of the show is so gorgeous. So sorry,
Yeah,
I think Gabi was going to say something next. No, I think it was you, Angie. Go ahead.
Oh, it's me. Or Roneet, did you want to share?
Yeah, I can share my first take on the script as well. So I leading up to reading the script, I've been doing some directing, not just acting. And so my first read of the script, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like wear my director hat and read through the script. And I got to the end and I was like, WTF, I have no idea what anyone could possibly do with this. And so I said, I guess I have to audition to find out.
Nice.
I love it.
So that's how I ended up here.
And we're so glad you did, because you're amazing in the show, all of you. I will say, as far as the movement, because we've mentioned it just a couple times, and the idea that it helps keep it clear where we are and who is dealing with who. But because that's not in the script, I will say my own personal take, something I said at the first production meeting, was that we had to have beautiful movement and a beautiful set and beautiful sound. And it had to be graceful and elegant and beautiful, because this script is extremely heavy and dark in many places. And I feel, right, the best dramas always have comedy sprinkled throughout to help lighten. It's like a valve you need to let release a bit, otherwise it's going to explode. And so this play has, it has a few fun little moments, but it's not very funner, right? I mean, there's some that you kind of laugh out of tension, but Christine has some great little one-liners. But overall, it's dense, right? And feels heavy emotionally. And I think the way to balance that is through the beauty of the way we're telling it, through the movement, through the soundscape, right? So George and I talked to each other like really early on about how that was necessary, and if you've seen the set, it's gorgeous. I mean, Ron is the best.
I can
I
pull
know
up
he
a
was
photo right now.
oh please. He was, I know, oh yes, from an
So
angle.
beautiful.
Yeah.
The
Our
birdcage.
our bird cage. And when we first talked, actually, just kind of giving some background on the set, we talked about, the fact that this play, it being out of time, being back and forth in what we affectionately call the multiverse, right, everyone? That it needed to be abstract, right? For us to ask the audience to suspend their disbelief and time jump with us, that you should not have a realistic looking drawing room, right? So he really came up with, obviously the set itself is loaded with metaphor, right? So the things I said, I'm really open, but the things that I was hoping would be my ask list were something circular in the platforming on the stage. Lisa,
Oh,
hi, lovely.
our executive artistic director has popped in. Hi, Lisa.
I couldn't find the Zoom link. I'm so sorry. I'll be quiet.
No, we love you. We're happy you're here. So we have the circle really being actually symbolic of the roundabout she's caught in, right? That this keeps happening over and over to different women in different times because, as you notice, the men do not change, right? That's in Stef Smith's script. And so, Ron incorporated what we now call the cake art when we were rehearsing. We're like, you're standing on the cake, the round platform. But this, idea of the broken doorway, the projection you saw in the back, the yellow wallpaper, it's referred to from offstage. But Ron and I talked about the fact that I really wanted to see it. I think it's, symbolic in numerous ways, but you hear.
I'll show that again. There's your yellow
Oh
wallpaper.
yeah, that'd be great. So just kind of, here's our little set Easter egg, right? It says, in the script, we have two different Christines come on and say the same exact bit, which, one of you could say your line better than I can, but Roneet, what's your line about the wallpaper?
I like your kitchen, Nora. It's very yellow. I mean, that wallpaper is certainly something. Gavi says it with a little more attitude than I do.
But Nora responds, I know it's a little old fashioned, but Thomas likes it that way, which I know we could talk about. Kailyn was able to tie a little Easter egg into the costumes. I'm sure we'll get to talking about more design in a bit, but I was talking to a friend about it before we started rehearsals, and we were talking, I was like, I really feel like this wallpaper, it's symbolizing her being trapped in Thomas's world, the fact that he doesn't change. It's very clear, right? And a playwright doesn't say it twice by mistake, right? There are some things that are repeated, but it's intentional. And so you have to take note. Well, do a little more research, and it just so happens there is a story that was based on a true happening that happened in the late 1800s called the Yellow Wallpaper. And it is about a woman who was having postpartum depression, which is referenced in our script, and the fact that her husband locked her in the attic on bed rest to relieve her hysteria, also referred to in our script. Right. And she slowly imagines like a woman behind the wallpaper. It's this idea of being trapped. Right. So I think it's really symbolic of being trapped. So I think it's one of those things that I thought, you know what, for the people that may know this classic literature, it's a bit of an Easter egg, but even if you don't, it makes sense in the script and it still has a significant symbolism within our play standing alone. And then of course, you know, it changes. I won't say to what, just in case somebody hasn't seen the play. Not too many spoilers.
Sorry, I realized I think there was something, a glitch where I didn't realize I was being invited to respond to the movement question.
Oh, sorry, Gabi.
No,
You can respond
so
now.
you can respond now. Okay. So just in terms of like having read the script and then having no idea what Angie was going to do with it, and really realizing what a genius she was for kind of envisioning, you know, the all of the movement and kind of how this whole thing was going to come together. What I did know from reading the script is that there's a lot of poetry in it, and there's a lot of this is not a realistic script. There's a lot of abstraction, and for me, what's like so exciting about getting to work on a script like that is for me there's kind of this constant question of why do theater, like why theater and not a film, because if you're talking about realism, theater is never going to be able to compete with the realism of film. And so actually for me, like you know, these kitchen sink dramas and, you know, all this kind of this hyper realism in theater, while it can be, as an actor I love that and I can be super fun and I can dig into it, it doesn't sort of satisfy this question for me of what personal question for me of like, why is this a play? Why is this the medium that we are choosing? And for a show like this, like this is live theater. Like this is not a film. This is experiential. And I think that the kind of it's truth through abstraction. It's using the something that is so not realistic to get at a much deeper truth in a way that is just unexpected and very much rooted in the live experience. And so I think that movement is just a part of how that all is the vehicle, is one of the ways in which it's like necessary for the story. And it's interesting because like the movement to me is so necessary and so fundamental, and that it's not in the script. So I really want to like praise Angie there for having kind of like envisioned all of that and really, you know, bringing it together. Okay.
Good points. Yeah. I wanted to piggyback on something Angie said. Kailyn and I were talking earlier about different Easter eggs and in her costuming and connections. And you mentioned the yellow wallpaper. And I know that Kailyn, I have a photo that I pulled up, this one. You mentioned, Kailyn, when you were talking to me, that the yellow wallpaper is reflected, especially in the men's costumes. And that was very purposeful on your part. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This was like what I originally thought was going to be my like oddball pitch when I spoke with Angie initially, because I had never worked with Angie before. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to really like sell this wallpaper thing to her. But Angie really approaches this particular piece, as everyone has sort of discussed, in this abstract way. One of the things that we talked about was that the men needed to be able to flow through time, because all of these men play their character in the different time periods, whereas the Noras are represented physically by different women. One of the things that we wanted to tie into that in terms of their costuming was a continuation of this cage motif that Ron was working on. The men are very much part of the symbolic cage that the Noras live in. And so we incorporated the wallpaper that is a part of Ron's design into all of the costumes that the men wear. So you can see here, Kyle, who plays our Daniel, his is in his tie. And then for our eagle-eyed viewers, those of you that have seen it or those that want to be on the lookout for it, Christian, who's here, he plays Daniel. He has the wallpaper in his socks, and then Thomas has it in a pocket square. And it's just like a little nod to how the men in Nora's life really dictate dictate just about everything. They confine her in many different ways, not just in the abstract, but in the physical as well, which again plays into some of Angie's staging.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember reading an interview with the playwright where she talked about how the men were kind of stuck. It's not so that they were stuck necessarily, but they were always, they don't have to adapt over time like women do. Like there's so much more pressure on women to be part of their specific time period and whatever the mores are and whatever society says. And men just get to be men. So I think that's really
Absolutely.
interesting.
Absolutely, yes. The women are expected to be more flexible and malleable, while the men can stay very stagnant, which was part of the logic in putting this wallpaper on them, is that they are unchanging in the way that a house is unchanging. It, once you build it, it's there. There's no, unless you make an active choice to change it, it will stay the same always.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to make sure that I give a shout out to our wonderful photographer, Evelyn Wynn, who just did a beautiful job on these photos. And Evelyn says, sorry, I didn't take good pictures of Daniel's socks. Yeah, I was thinking, did I have a photo of Daniel's socks? I don't know if I do, but I'm sure, Christian, you probably love those socks. And maybe you're going to take them home. I don't know.
There's one where he's sitting on the lip of the cake, and you can just barely get a little peek of his ankles. Very risque.
Very risque.
The Easter egg that I really love is the bird motif you have on the ladies. I actually really love that Easter egg as well.
Yeah, all of so a big part of this script is, spoiler alert if you haven't already seen the photo of the cage, but there's this big thing about the women being like birds. Thomas, that character Thomas, refers to the Noras as his skylark, and they have some discussion between the two of them about why specifically a skylark. And I liked the idea of he really views her as this like thing that he keeps in a cage. Wouldn't it make sense as a husband, if you're going to gift your wife something and you've got this nickname that you call her your skylark, perhaps you would gift her something that has a bird on it. So all of the Noras have a bird somewhere in their costuming. Melissa's bird, I think, is the most obvious one out of all of them. It's this little brooch that she wears. Let's see. I might
have a photo that shows it. Let's see. Can you see?
Yeah, you can kind of just see it on the right-hand side of her. She's got a little bird brooch, and then Gavi in the background. She's got a bird necklace, and then Roneet's costume includes a belt that has some birds on them. And actually, it doesn't exactly line up with technically the script number of the Noras, but it does go in an order. So, not Roneet. Melissa has one bird, Roneet has two birds, and Gabi has three birds for the three Noras.
The numbers line up with our Christines, if that helps.
Sure. Yes, that was 100% on purpose. And I didn't just steal that from Melissa.
Kailyn, I know there's another Easter egg you were talking about, and you posted this on your social media, and you were mentioning, oh, I'm clicking all the wrong buttons tonight. Okay, there we go. Spotlight. You were mentioning this was something that symbolizes purity.
Yeah, the pearls. And oh, look, you can just barely see Christian's sock at the bottom of that image. But yeah, so all of the women also have pearls incorporated into their costumes. You can see it here on Gavi's hand and her wedding band. She has them there. And then Melissa has it in her bird brooch. And Roneet in her earrings and her necklace has pearls as well. Historically, pearls have a variety of different symbols, but most commonly they're associated with the idea of purity and integrity and honesty, which is a big plot point in this play. And then also the historical Greek interpretation has ties to Aphrodite and the feminine mystique, which is also a huge point in this play. So there are some little things sprinkled in there that are, like I said, for those eagle-eyed viewers that happen to know what those different things represent.
That's interesting, Kailyn, because I always think of pearls as being an oyster's self-defense mechanism against an irritant inside its own house, which is very much on theme for Nora, right? With, yeah, like she's got these irritants, these things that are dangerous to her in her house. And the pearl is her way of protecting herself and ousting that irritant from her house and from herself.
That's part of how the pearl got its symbolism, actually, to begin with, is this idea of removing an impurity from one's being. And also historically in Western society, white represents purity. So it's sort of the perfect amalgamation of things, both in terms of like scientifically what's happening, and then our Western interpretation of what colors mean.
That is so interesting. I love that. Beautiful. Christian, I realize we haven't heard from you except for the socks. Some of you may recognize his name because Christian is our company photographer, and he does incredible work for City Lights, has done so for several seasons. He did do the pre-production photos of the 3 Noras, but for obvious reasons could not do the production photos. So thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Christian, it's fantastic to have you on our stage as well to show another side of your artistry. What drew
Thank you.
you to
Love
this
being
particular play? And tell us about your character too.
What was the first question?
What drew you to this play?
Oh, yes.
First.
Well, it's interesting because when I went to the general auditions for City Lights last summer, I had no intention of doing a non-comedy. And after I left, Lisa texted me and was like, "You should look at Nora." And I was like, "What is this Nora business?" And she sent me the script, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, there she is, guilty." She's like, "Guilty," and I was like, "Oh, this is really good." And then she tells me that Angie's directing, and I'm like, "Well, I can't not do this now," so I had to audition for Angie, and the script was very interesting. Not at all like, I mean, I'm like looking for the funny moments in all the male characters. I'm like, there's nothing funny here. Like, how is this gonna work? And I'm like, well, Angie's gonna make this work. So of course I had the full trust that it would be a wonderful production, and it is. So yeah, that's just called, I mean, if it weren't for like the gentle push of Lisa in the beginning, and then a little more push from Angie, like I probably wouldn't have done it. But it was, I'm really glad I did, because it's been a great experience and a wonderful thing to be a part of. So yeah. Yes, Lisa, you have a question?
Just to be clear, I've been wanting to work, or I've been wanting Angie to work at City Lights for a long time. And but last year we announced that Kirsten Brandt was doing the show, and then she got this awesome job in Las Vegas, and I was like, and it was all women, but I had like 3 women that I thought of to replace Kirsten, to see if they were available. And so Christian, you're like, well, and then Lisa hired Angie, but I did get a text from you saying, have you thought about Angie? And then I was like, yeah, I have, and this is perfect. So it all just kind of artistically went, boom, 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 boom. And I've been wanting you, Christian, to be on our stage forever, forever. So the beautiful thing about this play, well, there's so many beautiful things, and nobody asked me a question, so I'll try to, just make my sautéed shrimp and be quiet. But I've wanted you on our stage, Christian, and I've wanted Angie to direct for a long time. So to have those 2 things happen in, I would say my favorite show of this season, my favorite script of this season, I wanted to direct it, but there's so much going on at City Lights that my board of directors thought I should take a year from not directing anything. And I was like, but Nora, but it worked out perfectly, absolutely perfectly. So I'm just so glad to have both of you, and and like having Roneet back and Melissa back and Gavi, like just the last show. And I said, where have you been all my life? Like, where have you been? I just want to cast you in everything. So and Jeff is a dear friend, and having Kyle back, and like this has just been a beautiful, beautiful show for me personally and of course for City Lights. Now I'll be quiet.
Yeah, for those of you who may not recognize Gabi because she looks a little different from the last show, she was in The Games Afoot and she got to do all kinds of fun physical comedy. Exactly like this show, right, Gabi?
Exactly the same. Damien can tell us. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure why Ron didn't design a bar for this show that goes in and out of the fireplace, because that would have been
Exactly.
cool.
Yeah.
Well,
have
we're
been-
happy to have you back, and this is just it's a great team. It's fantastic. There's some interesting things going on in the chat. I want to read for those of us who are watching later on YouTube, or those of you. Kailyn said something interesting. She said, trying to make my costume plot with hardly any blocking written into the script was wild. I was so excited to see Angie's color-coded spreadsheet. Yep. You're in good company too, Angie. There are a lot of staff members at City Lights who color code everything. We're all about it. All right. And I've got another question here. Oh, I've got this question that was sent to me in a DM, so I'm going to read it out loud. Since Daniel is the one dude attending this event tonight, Nora's, how does each of your relationship with Daniel differ, or does it? Daniel, same question about yours with the different Noras. Ooh, that's a good question. Who wants to start that? Daniel, you want to start that?
I
Tell us
just
about
want
your
to say I love that each of us Noras has our own like name for him. We don't all call him
Yeah.
the same thing. I mean, he's Daniel, but like there's Dan, there's Danny, and there's Daniel. And I think that's such a lovely touch.
That's true for Thomas too. I realized that. Yeah.
Well, I guess I can start.
Yeah, tell us about your
No one else is
relationship with the
jumping
different
in.
Noras.
How is my relationship with each Nora different? Is I think what the question was.
Mhm.
Well, it's interesting. It feels sort of with the 1918 Nora Roneets, it feels a little bit more like almost like family. And there's a lot of like tender moments, I feel like, that are just like unspoken, but like, playful and happy and very, very good. For 1968, Nora, I have very little time, but very impactful time with that Nora. And so the relationship with her feels a little bit more tense and raw, and it's like, I mean, one of my favorite parts of the whole show and my favorite parts to be a part of. So but it's real short. So, but it's really important. And then 2018 with Gavi is like, it just feels like, hey, it's my cool friend, and so like with Gavi, it feels like I mean, the time I spend with her on stage, those moments are also very much like, this is someone who's very close to me and who's very important in my life. And of course, like things come out, and it's just very it's a very special relationship, that 2018 one. It's because it feels a little bit more like there's more to unpack in that relationship that gets told on stage.
Nice.
Yeah.
Angie, do you want to tell us what your line you're referring to? Angie said in the chat, one of Daniel's lines to Nora is actually my favorite line in the play. Or is it a spoiler?
Maybe. I'll let Daniel say it.
You want me to say it? Yeah, he says,
You know what it-
you are worth love, Nora. I suddenly got a sense you don't think that. You are worth love. Yeah.
I will say too that so Christian and I have been friends for a very long time as well. And every time I, Melissa, the actor, hear Christian, my friend, the actor, say it to me, I like there's a dual layer there, right? Like I, as Nora, am hearing Daniel say it, but I'm also hearing my dear friend Christian say it to me. And there's this like added poignancy to it for me personally. I don't know if you feel that way, Christian.
Absolutely.
Too,
Absolutely. Yeah. It is deeply meaningful and impactful for me to be staring into your eyes, saying those words. And every night I pray to God, I hope I don't say Melissa, because because I'm I'm saying it with like such honesty. I really am. And it is yeah, so I totally agree. I totally agree.
That's beautiful. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that, Melissa.
Yeah, and I'll
Beautiful.
just say so that line is said after something that happens with my Nora that is the Nora spend a lot of time listening on stage. That's one of the cool things about this play. Also just as like an acting exercise, like how do you, when you're not the one actually going through the scene yourself, but what is happening on stage is going to affect your circumstances, your given circumstances for where you're about to go. So how do you stay as much a part of what's happening on stage through listening, through energy, through feeling it, through yeah, things that are not sort of classically being involved in the way we would normally as like an actor in a scene. And that line is said, like I'm listening to that line. But it's not to me directly, but I feel it, and so you know, I'm sure we all feel that, and it's just it's such an impactful thing. And I won't say exactly what it's coming out of because that is a spoiler, but the other thing I would say, and can't speak to the difference between the relationships with the Noras because I'm not Nora 3 or Nora 2, so I don't know. But for Nora 1, like I think what's so cool about the relationship with Danny is that it's so warm and it's so in a friendship way loving that it's almost like that comfort and deep ability to be vulnerable with someone allows space for decisions that shouldn't be made to be made. And so I won't say more there, but it's an interesting, like there's a purity to it that then, because that purity is so real and so there, can then transform into something else. And yeah, I think that's a interesting dynamic that can happen.
Well said. Well said. Anyone else want to add anything about that topic, or shall we move on?
I was just gonna say I agree with Christian that I think that there's just such tenderness between Nora 3 and her Daniel. And I just wanted to say that I think that that very special line of Daniel's, it really does get me every night. But you know, there are some lines in this play that speak to every woman and every woman's experience in a deep, deep, sometimes dark, and beautiful way. And I think that is what is really special about this play. Just sort of sprinkled throughout this play are like just these hands that reach out to women and see women for everything that they have experienced. Um, and that is one particular one of them. It's a beautiful scene.
Lovely. Lovely. Well, we are about 10 minutes to 8, so we're going to go for about 10 more minutes. Again, if anyone else has questions, feel free to type them into the chat or raise your hand. I have just 2 more photos I wanted to bring up, 2 more photos of Evelyn's. One is of a serious moment in the play, and then one is of the entire cast and team kind of making reference to that. And nobody knows what I'm talking about, so I'll just open it up. So Angie, you have something interesting here where each Nora, we talked about this a lot at the first photo shoot, where you said there's a touch, there's a moment with a touch that shows part of your character, and each one of the Noras, although I guess Roneet is Christine here, has a particular touch. Can we talk about
Yeah,
this without giving too much away?
Yes. So even though Roneet has the Christine scarf on, she is very much, this is a transition.
Oh,
So
okay,
she is very much Nora, or she's about to, you know, lose the scarf. So when I first started thinking about the movement that I wanted to add, I kind of had you know, 3 touchstones, like motifs that I wanted to see reoccurring throughout the play. And this one feel is probably the most important, and it's really the scar. It's the scar touch. So I will say that each Nora has a different scar. I don't think this gives away the plot. We don't have to give all the details, but for those who've seen it, you know the story of each of their individual scars. There's a monologue that each one gives throughout the play, and it at different points means different things to them. But I think it's when it starts out, you know, sometimes you would think of a scar as a negative thing, but to her it's not, as you hear in her monologues. It actually is that moment of feeling real, right? She lived so much of her life as a doll, and being what other people expect her to be. And I'm sure, you know, our Noras could speak to this, but what it meant to them individually. But at some point, it means hope, right? And for some of them, it was that moment of feeling real. But then in other moments in the play, we use it where it's almost like the searing pain of reality. Did any of the Noras maybe want to speak to a little bit to the movement throughout, or if it affected you in any way?
No, I mean, I think you just said it, that it's her connection with reality. And that through, I think we even talked about in the rehearsal process, at least for me, you know, we talked about in the rehearsal process that, like, when, you know, people who cut themselves, that comes from a wanting to feel something real, to ground themselves in something. And you know, the play is called A Doll's House. Like, she is referred to as a porcelain doll. Everything, nothing is real. She's playing pretend. Her whole life is playing this role of this doll wife. And or, you know, and this, I mean, this play brings in the metaphor of a skylark or a songbird that is literally caged and on display to be beautiful and for the pleasure of a man, a rich man. And so it's even though a scar, like the scar, yeah, it's painful, but at least it's real. At least, and there's control. Also, the idea of blood and bleeding, I mean, is such a, like, what women bleed for, is such a powerful thing. And bleeding for something that you care about and is real and is yours. As Yeah, that's not being particularly articulate here, but yeah.
Yeah, so we had the one touch movement piece that you see in the picture was right, the scar. The other is the breath, inspired by the lavender. This idea that she has to breathe it in, right? Like, she has to try to find the beauty in everything around her. It's in the opening piece, right? And continuing that, and then finally being in a place where that it's really like stopping, taking that breath, and being able to live in a moment authentically, unconfined, right? And then there's this touch we do quite a bit where they put their hand in on their rib cage and on their heart, and we use the breath. And that's something that is repeated several times in the poetry of the piece. They say, my skeleton, my rib cage, my heart. And it's this, you know, again, it's the feeling of being complete and real and vulnerable and everything. And even if something is spinning out of control and awful, at least it feels real, right? And at least she feels like she somehow, you know, has her own agency. So we use those kind of that imagery throughout, right? The scar, the breath, the rib cage, the heart. And so if you haven't seen it already, look secret, or some of you might go, oh yeah. But the scar in particular, I like the idea, just like the story, it creates some intrigue that when you first see it, it's, what are they doing, right? It looks, they have this touch, but then it's this slow mystery that unravels, right? We hear from Roneet's Nora first, then we hear from, so 1918, and it's told in chronological order, right? And then, and the last one, and then Melissa's Nora starts off act 2, right? Day 2, and then we hear from Gavi's. So it's kind of, I hope an interesting visual that is not scripted, that helps kind of carry you through the that anticipation and energy of what she's going through.
There's a very nice comment in the chat from Sarah. It says it also shows that no matter how a woman's world is the same over the years, their scar is unique to them, making that person one of a kind.
I love that.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah.
Thank you.
There was also a question in the chat about the scarf that kind of turns Nora into Christine, and Diane and David wanted to know, was the scarf specified in the script, or was that a choice for this production? And Melissa says the scarf was not scripted and was another brilliant choice that Angie brought. So very nice. So there's one other photo, and this is the whole cast and team, and I believe we're all making reference to the touch in our own particular way. Not I mean, I wasn't there. They are. And I'm not sure what Christian's doing.
I'm pointing to my scar. I have one
you
scar. I've been danger reversed my life, so I don't have, but I have one scar on my pinky from a little mishap when I was a kid. So it's like, a straight line. So it's a real scar. It's real. So I'm pointing
so
to it.
sad.
Yeah, otherwise that'd be perfect.
So yeah, usually when we have the cast and team photo at the end, there's a little people are having some fun with it. I don't know what George is doing. Lisa is making a really interesting face, but I don't think she's here anymore, so we can't ask her.
I'm here.
Oh, you are? What are you doing, Lisa?
Well, I just was like, what are we gonna do right now? That's what that face is. Hilarious. I will say that I just want to say that this play is about agency. And it's about how hard we have to fight for it. And in 2024, we're still doing that. It's just hidden better. So one of the things I love about this play is that it was normal and everyday and out in the open that Roneet's character had no agency. But now we still have to fight tooth and nail and put up with a lot of things. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody on this, but it's why I love the play so much. That agency for all humans is important. And that, I think, Gavi, was it you that used the word? I was like, oh yes, that's why I can't remember who used the word originally, but it is the core of taking a story that was written so long ago and showing that I don't know if we will ever be equal. I used to think so, but I'm not sure anymore. But what is happening is that some of us, whether it be a cultural background or a gender identification, are starting to realize I'm going to feel good about myself and take the agency that I need and that I deserve, even if it isn't the norm. And even if I'm not given permission every day. So that I think that is changing.
Yeah.
And this cast is so beautiful. And Angie, like, I'm so grateful to you and your vision and what a beautiful job you did with my favorite play of this year. See how I try to, like, do that thing, Becky, where it's like,
you always wrap
and
it
on
all
that
up so
note,
beautifully. I know, you wrap it up with a bow. It's so beautiful at the end. But there's a couple more questions, a couple more comments in the chat, just real quick. Kailyn says, I also love this play doesn't shy away from the multitudes that individual women hold. Often modern media shows women only in positive lights, which I think adds to the misperception that the fight for equality is over. Yeah. Yeah, well said. And Lisa, you didn't have to go away. That was great.
That's a really good point, Kailyn, because a lot of people think that Nora is a monster.
I think I think what a lot of people, and even my mother who came to see the show, has a problem with the choice that Nora makes in regards to her children. She really struggled to get behind that. And I think that even if you disagree with the choice that Nora makes by the end of the play, it is still critical to see women in states of struggle and strife, whether it's, you know, internally, externally, in whatever way. I think we don't have a problem watching men make poor choices in media, but when a woman breaks that mold, it presents almost as this idea that the woman must be a monster, that there is no room for women to make mistakes in their life, which I think is one, a harmful stereotype to try to force onto women, but is just at the end of the day untrue, right? Everybody makes mistakes, everyone makes poor choices, and I think that this play highlights that in a way that is so critical in terms of like progressing equality.
I also think it might not be a mistake. It
Yeah,
might,
I mean, it
might not be a
doesn't have to
mistake.
be a mistake.
What I love in the script is how it says you never see her with her kids. You know, she's like, find somebody that will spend time with them. I'm a mom. I could never walk away from my children, ever in a million years. However, she wasn't engaged. So really, for the good of those children, we all have chosen family, don't we all? Don't we all? I lost my brother. I mean, he passed away when he was 35, and I have a best friend that is like my brother. And I don't think she's a monster at all, because she wasn't able to. We have to listen to our own heartbeats first, you know. But I mean, a lot of people are like, how could anybody do that? I could never do that. However, we have choices now, like, you know, that not everybody has access to.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think you bring up a really good point. It begs the question of, I think a lot of people are like, that's such a selfish choice, the thing that Nora made, the decision she makes in the end. But I really agree with you, Lisa. Like, there's an argument to be made that it is a selfless choice to say, I cannot provide this for my child. I recognize that fault in myself, and that at least in the meantime, I can't do that. Someone else needs to do that for the betterment of the children.
So I have to say, because we talked about this in rehearsal, right at the beginning, and I'm also a mom and could never imagine myself leaving my child, but I fully support what happens in the play, because I think if we just take it at face value about, oh, she's making a horrible decision, she's leaving her kids, that is looking at very surface level. And what this script does such a good job of, this version of it, is diving in to her psyche and what she's feeling and what she is going through. And the fact is, you cannot be there for anyone if you can't save yourself. And she has to save herself. She's literally going to throw herself in that river. Those children would have no mother, because that's how far she is. She is the woman stuck in the wallpaper. She is the woman ready to dive into the river. It has nothing to do with if she loves her children or not, right? The world she has been confined, the cage she has been confined in, everyone around her has made her into something that she is not. And she has no idea who she really is anymore.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And but that's the difference. You say, like, women, even today, right, are not allowed to break. You are not allowed to, you have to be a certain way, right? I mean, I've had this discussion with a lot of people about like miscarriage, right? That's something that at least 25% of women have gone through something like this experience that's extremely painful, that causes depression, all these things, but nobody talks about it. you're made to feel like you are less than, right? You're alone, all these things. So, but that's just one example of what women go through, right? The postpartum depression, so much. So, it's like, Gavi played Nora in Nora 2, a different version of the play, which is a very different take on, what happens after the aftermath. And I remember you, Gavi, saying that a lot of people came up to you like, oh, she's a horrible person. But I do think we're forgetting that she needs to save herself. This is not like she's walking out and just, I'm living the life now.
Absolutely. And I think Elsa in the chat was saying, historically men do this all the time and we don't villainize them for it, which, hopefully this doesn't offend a lot of people, but that is historically true, right? Like women are expected to be the caretakers in the home at all costs. And that expectation is not put on the men in the way that it is their female counterparts. And I think the play does an amazing job of exploring that. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not you agree with Nora's decision at the end, we're, as modern day women, even from 2018 till now, living in a place of extreme privilege that these characters did not have at the time that they existed. And yeah, exactly what Lisa was saying a moment ago, our children learn from us. So what true benefit is there in watching your mother suffer an unhappy life? What are you teaching future generations of women, that your job is to sit and suffer silently? That's not one that I personally subscribe to. So I love the way that the play ends. I think it's extremely poignant and important to see women making choices that we don't agree with.
And how cool is it? There's like 3 different endings.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool in the script.
Yeah,
that there are
that's
3,
really
each
cool.
Nora has their own freedom, their own ending. I love this script so much. I'm gonna like try to Instagram Stef. Just to say thank you for putting this out there.
I think you should. It's a beautiful script. Yeah, it was. I agree with you. When I was reading all the scripts for this year, this was my favorite as well. Really, really gorgeous. Thank you for this great discussion. Thank you for all the terrific questions. And thank you to our artists, of course, for making this beautiful show. I said this at the top of the broadcast, and I'll say it again. If anyone was there Sunday night when we had to unfortunately cut the show short because of the storm and the power outage, and you would like to come back and see it again, please contact me. No further ticket cost. I can also send you the script, and I am going to put my email address again in the chat. So feel free. I've had quite a few people ask me, how did it end? How did it end? And I have this little blurb I've written for like, this Nora did this Nora did this, and then I have the script. So feel free. Those of you who haven't seen it yet, please do. We run through February 18th, and it's quite a remarkable piece of work. Thank you all, everyone. Have a great night, and stay warm and dry.